Morning light streams through the living room curtains, illuminating the family photos on the wall. My husband David and me, our 8-year-old daughter Sophie, and our 6-month-old son Ethan. Living in our suburban home, we look like the perfect happy family to anyone who sees us. I work from home as a marketing manager. My husband's a lawyer who's devoted to his work but puts family above everything else. Sophie's a bright child who sometimes says odd things. She seems to have this intuition about things, this sense when something feels off. Ethan's a quiet baby who doesn't cry much. I'm a cautious person by nature, so I've installed a baby monitor in the bedroom. Only David and my mother-in-law Patricia know about the monitor. One afternoon, I got a call from my sister Ashley. "Jennifer, listen. I'm getting married next month." My hand trembled as I gripped the receiver. Ashley's voice was bubbling with happiness. "Really? Congratulations, Ashley. What's he like?" "Still a secret. But I want everyone to meet him. You have to come to the wedding." Ashley's wedding would be held over the weekend in a city about 2 hours away by plane. I thought for a moment before responding. Ethan's still so small, it might be hard to bring him along. "Why don't you ask your mother-in-law? She loves her grandchildren, doesn't she?" I hesitated at my sister's suggestion. It was true that Patricia loved taking care of her grandchildren. But honestly, I found her a bit difficult. I always felt like she was looking at me with critical eyes. That evening when I discussed it with David, he said immediately, "Let's ask Mom. She'll be fine." The next day, I called my mother-in-law. Patricia paused before answering. "Of course I'll watch him. But Jennifer, do you really trust me?" Those words stung. My mother-in-law seemed to see right through my feelings. "Please. I'm asking you to take care of Ethan." David took the phone and convinced his mother. Patricia wore a complicated expression but eventually agreed. "All right. I'll take good care of him." The night before we left, Sophie came to me. My daughter's face looked a bit anxious. "Mom, something feels weird." "What's wrong, Sophie?" "I don't know. But is Ethan going to be okay?" I gently stroked my daughter's head. Sophie's intuition was sometimes right, but I thought this time it was just anxiety. "Grandma will be there, so he'll be fine. Don't worry." The next morning, we went to my mother-in-law's house to drop off Ethan. Patricia took the baby at the front door and looked straight into my eyes. "Have a good time. Don't worry." Her words seemed sincere. But I got in the car with a heavy heart. This was my first time as a mother leaving my 6-month-old baby to go on a trip. When I looked back, Patricia was holding Ethan and waving. I waved back weakly, and the car pulled away from my mother-in-law's house. The drive to the airport felt longer than usual. David gripped the steering wheel in the driver's seat while I sat in the passenger seat. Sophie in the back seat stared out the window. I noticed my daughter wasn't acting like herself. "Sophie, it's okay. Ethan's with Grandma." My daughter turned to look at me. In her eyes was an anxiety she couldn't put into words. "Mom, is Ethan really okay?" This was the 3rd time. Since we'd left, my daughter kept asking the same question. I took out my cell phone and called my mother-in-law. After a few rings, Patricia answered. "Is Ethan all right?" "He's fine, Jennifer. He just woke up from his nap. He's in a great mood." My mother-in-law's voice was calm and reassuring. I hung up and told Sophie. "See, Grandma says Ethan's doing fine." But Sophie's expression didn't brighten. My daughter just nodded slightly and turned her gaze back to the window. David looked at our daughter in the rearview mirror and said to me quietly, "She really is a worrier, isn't she? Maybe she takes after me. I smiled wryly. I was certainly a cautious person too. But Sophie's anxiety seemed like something different from simple worrying. We arrived at the airport and checked in. On the way to the boarding gate, Sophie stayed silent the whole time. Usually she'd be excited about flying, but today was different. We boarded the plane and took our seats, and preparations for takeoff began. I fastened my seatbelt and took a deep breath. I was anxious about being separated from Ethan, but this was my sister's wedding. For Ashley's sake, I had to smile and celebrate. The plane began rolling down the runway and soon lifted into the sky. David spoke to me as I gazed at the sea of clouds outside the window. It's been a while since we had a family trip. Yes. But I was really surprised that Ashley's getting married. Actually, I haven't been in touch with her much lately. I've been too busy. That was the truth. Since Ethan was born, I'd had my hands full with childcare and work. Even when my sister called, I never had time to really talk. I always cut the conversation short after just a few minutes. Memories came flooding back. When we were children, our parents always compared me and Ashley. Jennifer's the honor student, Jennifer can do anything. Every time they said that, I saw my sister's expression darken. I hated it. But I couldn't say anything. As adults, we went our separate ways. I got married and had children, while my sister stayed single and pursued her career. Before I knew it, the distance between us sisters had grown. Jennifer. David's voice brought me back to the present. Sorry. What? You were deep in thought. Yeah. I was remembering Ashley. In the seat next to me, Sophie had picked up her smartphone. My daughter tried to open a game but quickly closed the screen. She opened it again, then closed it again. She repeated this action several times. Sophie, what's wrong? I don't know. I don't feel like playing games. My daughter's face was pale. I got a bit worried and put my hand on her forehead. No fever. Are you feeling sick? No. It's just that weird feeling again. David turned around and said, Sophie, it's okay. Grandma even sent us a picture. Ethan's fine. It was true that Patricia had just sent us a photo of Ethan. The baby was smiling, held in my mother-in-law's arms. Nothing seemed wrong. But Sophie started to say something, then closed her mouth. My daughter seemed unable to explain her feelings well. I put my arm around her shoulder and said, You were looking forward to Aunt Ashley's wedding, weren't you? And you'll get to wear that pretty dress. Sophie nodded slightly, but her expression still didn't clear. About 30 minutes later, Sophie suddenly tried to stand up. Bathroom. The seatbelt sign was still on, but my daughter was restless. I made her sit down and take deep breaths. Wait just a little longer. We'll go together once the sign goes off. Sophie sat back down but stared intently at her smartphone. Her finger seemed to be hesitating over the screen. She wanted to open something but was holding back. That's how it looked. Sophie, what are you looking at? My daughter looked up at me. In her eyes was a mixture of fear and determination. Mom, can I look at the baby monitor app? I was a bit surprised. The baby monitor app was on my smartphone, but it was also on Sophie's phone through our family sharing settings. I'd set it up just in case. Sure, but why all of a sudden? I don't know. I just want to see Ethan. David said puzzled, we just looked at his picture. I want to see him in real time. There was an unusual strength in Sophie's voice. I nodded, though a bit confused. Okay. But I'm sure there's nothing wrong. Sophie opened the app with trembling fingers. A spinning circle on the screen indicated it was loading. For a few seconds, we stared at the screen. Those few seconds felt like an eternity. I could feel Sophie's breathing getting heavier. My chest felt tight for no reason. Then the moment the screen opened, the smartphone nearly slipped from Sophie's hands. My daughter's face turned white as paper, her lips trembling. "Mom, Dad, look at this." My daughter's voice was hoarse. I quickly took the smartphone from Sophie's hands. The moment I looked at the screen, I felt like my heart stopped. The baby monitor footage showed a figure lying on the floor. Patricia. My mother-in-law wasn't moving. Next to her, Ethan was crying. I couldn't hear the baby's cries as audio, but I could see his little mouth open wide. And at the edge of the screen, two dark shadows. Clearly people we didn't know. They looked like men. "What's on the screen?" My voice was shaking. David leaned over to look at the screen. "That's Mom." "Why is she on the floor?" On the screen, one of the dark shadows moved. It was approaching Ethan. Then Patricia, who should have been lying there, suddenly moved. My mother-in-law desperately crawled and threw herself in front of the baby. Like a shield. Sophie started crying. "Ethan's in danger." The passengers around us turned to look. Attention focused on our seats. But I couldn't care about that. My fingers were shaking so much I could barely press my mother-in-law's number. Finally pressing the call button, the ringtone began. It kept ringing. Once, twice, 3 times. No one answered. "Pick up, please, pick up." I muttered like a prayer. But the ringtone just kept ringing emptily. David stood up. "I'll call 911. "Wait." I grabbed my husband's arm. "How can we from here? We're still on the plane." David thought for a moment, then pressed the call button. 911. The emergency number. When the operator answered, my husband started explaining the situation. "My son's in danger. We need police right now. The address is..." I looked at Sophie's smartphone again. The footage continued. Patricia lay in front of the baby, not moving. One of the dark figures seemed to kick my mother-in-law. I almost screamed. A flight attendant approached our seats. "Sir, ma'am, is something wrong?" David explained. "It's an emergency. Our son's being attacked. We need to land immediately." The flight attendant looked confused. "I'm sorry. We're scheduled to land in about an hour. We can't wait an hour. Our son could die." My voice echoed through the cabin. The passengers around us murmured. One woman stood up and said, "Please help these people." The flight attendant began using the radio to contact the captain. I looked at the screen again. The footage shook slightly. Looking more carefully, the dark shadows were 2 men. And behind them, another figure briefly appeared. A woman. Who? I brought my face close to the screen. The woman's figure quickly disappeared from the screen, but that brief moment stuck with me strangely. I felt like I knew her. But that couldn't be. On the screen, Patricia moved again. My mother-in-law was trying to grab one of the men. But she seemed to have no strength. The man shoved Patricia away. My mother-in-law's head hit the floor. "Stop it!" I screamed involuntarily. Sophie clung to me. My daughter's body was trembling. Grandma's protecting Ethan." Sophie's words made me catch my breath. My mother-in-law was desperately trying to protect the baby. Patricia, who had always kept her distance from me, was risking her life to protect her grandson. David hung up the phone and said, "Police are on their way. But it'll still take time." I remembered our neighbor, Mrs. Johnson. A kind woman in her 50s who was always tending her garden. "I'll call our neighbor." With trembling fingers I dialed the number. When Mrs. Johnson answered, I spoke breathlessly. "Please check my house right now. The baby's in danger. Please." "Jennifer, calm down. I'll go right now." A few minutes after hanging up, Mrs. Johnson called back. "Jennifer, I've called the police. The front door's open, and I can hear noises inside." Over the phone, I could hear a baby crying. Then a man shouting. Something falling. Mrs. Johnson's scream. "Someone's in there, police, hurry." I gripped my cell phone tightly. "Ethan, Ethan." Then Sophie screamed. I looked at the smartphone screen. In the footage, the woman's figure appeared again. This time I could see her clearly. The moment I saw her profile, my whole body froze. That was Ashley. My sister was giving instructions to the intruders. The screen captured it. Ashley's mouth was moving. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could tell she was clearly giving orders. "No." That was the only word that came out. David peered at the screen and his face changed. "That's Ashley, isn't it?" "No, that can't be." But the person on the screen was unmistakably my sister. My sister, who should have been heading to her wedding. Why was she at my house? Why was she with the intruders? On the screen, one of the men tried to pick up Ethan. Patricia mustered her last strength and grabbed the man's leg. The man stumbled. In that moment, another person burst into the room. Mrs. Johnson. Our neighbor was shouting something. In the chaos, the screen shook violently. Then suddenly, it went black. "It's not showing anything." Sophie screamed. I closed the app and opened it again. But the screen stayed black. "The power's been cut," David said. Someone turned off the monitor. I gripped my cell phone and called Mrs. Johnson. The ringtone sounded. But no one answered. I tried Patricia again. Still no answer. The passengers around us were looking at us with concern. The flight attendant came back and said, "The captain is preparing for an emergency landing. We can land in 45 minutes. 45 minutes. What would happen in that time? Was Ethan safe? Patricia? Mrs. Johnson? And Ashley? Was my sister really there? Why? My mind was in chaos. Sophie was crying next to me. David held our daughter while gripping my hand. "It'll be okay. It'll definitely be okay." But my husband's voice was shaking too. All we could do was wait for landing. The moment the plane landed, I tried to get into the aisle before it had completely stopped. The flight attendant tried to stop me, but when David explained, she silently let us through. Running down the stairs and into the airport building. As I ran, my cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello? Mrs. Miller. This is the city police." My feet stopped. David and Sophie stopped too. "There was a break-in at your home. Is my son safe?" My voice cracked. People around us turned to look. But I didn't care. "The baby is safe. Your mother-in-law protected him." At those words, my knees nearly gave out. David supported me. However, the officer's voice grew heavy. "Your mother-in-law is currently being transported to the hospital. She's seriously injured. Seriously injured? Yes. We'll discuss the details at the hospital. St. Mary's Hospital emergency room. After hanging up, we started running. We caught a taxi outside the airport and gave the hospital name. As the driver pulled away, Sophie clung to my arm. Is Grandma okay? She's okay. She's okay. I told my daughter over and over. As if telling myself too. At the hospital, I gave my name at reception. A nurse led us to the emergency waiting room. 2 police officers were waiting there. Mrs. Miller. An older officer stood up. Your mother-in-law is in the intensive care unit. She has a skull fracture and broken ribs. Can I see her? She hasn't regained consciousness yet. According to the doctor, her life was saved. Her life was saved. I repeated those words over and over in my mind. My son, where's Ethan? He's in another room. I'll take you there. Led by the officer, we entered a small room. There was Ethan, sleeping in a female officer's arms. I rushed over and took the baby. Ethan's warmth, his softness. He was alive. He was safe. Tears overflowed and wouldn't stop. David embraced us. Sophie was crying too. I want to see Grandma. At my daughter's words, I nodded. Later. She's resting now. The officer said quietly, could I ask you some questions? Who was scheduled to visit your home today? Still holding Ethan, I answered, no one. Except my mother-in-law. What about your sister, Ashley Miller? The moment I heard that name, my body went rigid. Ashley was supposed to be having her wedding. That's why There is no wedding. At the officer's words, I looked up. We've arrested 2 perpetrators. One of them has confessed. The officer paused before continuing. This incident was planned by your sister, Ashley Miller. I felt like the world had stopped. David gripped my shoulder. What are you saying? My sister was having a wedding. The fiancé is also fictitious. The wedding invitation was a fake. I shook my head. That couldn't be possible. According to the perpetrator's testimony, Ashley was trying to, your family, especially the baby. The officer chose his words carefully as he continued. Kidnap him. David raised his voice. Why? Why would Ashley do this? The officer took out a tablet. We have security camera footage. Would you like to see it? I nodded. The screen showed the front of my house. The time stamp was this morning. 2 men approached the front door. And behind them, Ashley appeared. My sister was giving instructions to the men. Her expression wasn't the Ashley I knew. It was cold, as if possessed by something. The footage switched to inside the house. Probably a recording from the baby monitor. The men entered the room. Patricia stood up to confront them. My mother-in-law was shouting something. One of the men pushed Patricia down. At the edge of the screen, Ashley's figure appeared. My sister stood at the entrance to the room with her arms crossed. As if watching a performance. Patricia crawled across the floor toward Ethan's crib. When the man tried to pick up Ethan, my mother-in-law lunged at him. The man kicked Patricia. My mother-in-law's head hit the floor. Stop it. I screamed. But the footage continued. The other man joined in, pinning Patricia down. Ashley entered the room and approached Ethan. Then the doorbell rang. Ashley and the footage turned around. Mrs. Johnson's voice could be heard. The men moved frantically. One noticed the baby monitor and turned off the power. The footage cut off there. After that, your neighbor called the police, and the perpetrators were arrested. The officer continued his explanation. Ashley attempted to flee but was immediately apprehended. I nearly collapsed. David supported me. Sophie grabbed my clothes and cried. Why? Why would Ashley do this? According to the perpetrator's statements, it wasn't for money. There was a personal grudge. Personal grudge. Against me. My sister resented me. Can I see her? I want to see my sister. David looked at me in surprise. Jennifer. I have to hear the reason. Directly from Ashley. The officer thought for a moment, then nodded. She's in detention. I'll take you there. I gave Ethan to David and followed the officer. The detention center was about 15 minutes by car from the hospital. I was led to a visiting room and sat in a chair to wait. The door opened, and Ashley came in. My sister was handcuffed. When our eyes met, Ashley looked away. When the guard left, silence fell. I stared at my sister. Ashley stayed silent, looking at the floor. Why? My voice echoed in the room. What did I do to you? Ashley didn't look up. After a long silence, my sister's shoulders began to shake. I realized she was crying. You were always the only one who was happy. It was a hoarse voice. I lost everything. My job, my boyfriend, our parents' love. Ashley. Every time I saw your perfect family, I wanted to destroy it. My sister's words pierced my chest. I thought if I took something from you, I could win. Ashley looked up. Her eyes were red and swollen. But I was wrong. Even hurting you didn't fill my heart. I couldn't say anything. I hadn't noticed my sister's suffering. I'm not perfect either. The words finally came out. I'm always anxious, lacking confidence. I'm sorry I didn't notice about you. Ashley shook her head. It's too late. It's already too late. It's not too late. Not yet. Jennifer. My sister's voice trembled. But no more words came. The guard returned and announced the end of visiting hours. Ashley stood up. My sister looked back at me just once. Her eyes overflowed with regret and sadness. When the door closed, I stayed seated in the chair, unable to move. Our sisterly bond had broken in this way. My happiness had driven my sister into a corner. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I couldn't stop them. Several weeks later, Patricia regained consciousness. I was holding my mother-in-law's hand in the hospital room. My mother-in-law's eyes slowly opened and looked around. Then when she recognized my face, her lips moved. Ethan. It was a raspy voice. Holding back tears, I answered. He's safe. Because you protected him. Tears flowed from Patricia's eyes. Thank goodness. I tightened my grip on my mother-in-law's hand. Why? Why did you risk your life to protect him? Patricia looked at me. In her eyes was a kindness I'd never seen before. Because he's my grandson. At those words, I broke down crying. Patricia weakly squeezed my hand back. Jennifer, there's something I need to tell you. My mother-in-law looked up at the ceiling. Actually, I've been envious of you all along. Of me? The perfect mother, the perfect wife. Things I couldn't do. Patricia's voice trembled. That's why I kept my distance. Seeing you reminded me of my own failures. I shook my head. I'm not perfect either. I'm always anxious, lacking confidence. Really? Yes. I thought you didn't like me. Patricia laughed quietly. I'm sorry. Actually, I admired you. We embraced. My mother-in-law's body was thin and frail, but her warmth was real. 6 months have passed since then. Patricia has fully recovered and now visits our house almost every day. One Sunday afternoon, we gathered for dinner in the living room. Patricia was holding Ethan. Ethan had turned 1 and had grown into a cheerful baby who laughed a lot. Sophie sat next to my mother-in-law, smiling. Grandma's a hero, right? When Sophie said that, Patricia laughed bashfully. That's too much. David poured wine and said, Mom, why don't you stay over tonight? Thank you. But I'll come again tomorrow. I looked at my mother-in-law and smiled from the heart. Since that day, our relationship had completely changed. The family bond that wasn't blood-related had become irreplaceable. I thought about Ashley. My sister received a suspended sentence after a psychiatric evaluation. She's now receiving psychiatric treatment. I visit her regularly. At last week's visit, Ashley said to me, "Why do you keep coming?" "Because you're my sister." I held my sister's hand. I hated you then. But it was also my fault for not noticing you were suffering. Tears welled up in Ashley's eyes. Maybe someday we can start over as family. For the first time, my sister seemed to smile from her heart. Yeah. Remembering those words, I looked outside through the living room window. Patricia was playing in the yard with Ethan and Sophie. When my mother-in-law lifted the baby high, Ethan laughed with delight. Family isn't just about blood relations. But even with blood ties, you can get love wrong. Real family is people who protect each other with their lives. Whether by blood or by marriage. Patricia turned around and waved at me. I waved back. Mom, take a picture. I heard Sophie's voice. I picked up my smartphone and went out to the yard. Patricia, Sophie, and Ethan stood together smiling. When I pressed the shutter, a perfect family photo was captured. But now I know. There's no such thing as a perfect family. It's about accepting each other's imperfections and protecting one another. That's what family is. The evening sun illuminated the living room. On the wall hung a new family photo. Patricia was in it too. It was a portrait of our real family. David put his arm around my shoulder. We're happy, aren't we? Yes. We really are. Ethan's laughter echoed. Sophie ran around. Patricia smiled gently. I wished this moment could last forever. Not perfect, but full of love. That was us.